Hi guys, I'm here today to talk about the books that I read in the month of June. So, 3 of these books I've already spoke about in a reading vlog, which I'll link up here. And I spoke about them in quite a lot of detail, so I'm not going to go into them loads again here. But the 3 books are My Lover's Lover by Maggie O'Farrell. This is her second novel and I'm working my way through her books in publication order. I really enjoyed this one. I don't think it's going to be one of her best novels. I gave this about 3 stars. It has some flaws, but I still overall enjoy her writing style, so I'm glad I read this one. Then we have A Stranger City by Linda Grant. This is the second novel of hers I've read, the first one being The Dark Circle. And again, I really enjoy her writing style. I felt the same way about both the novels, although I preferred this one overall. I think she can write beautifully. I think she can draw characters and place excellently. But I think she's not so great at pulling together the plot. I think she gets a little bit lost in setting the scene and describing the characters. And so this went from being a 5-star book in the first section to ending up being around a 3.5-star book, which was a bit of a disappointment and it was a bit bittersweet, but I'd still recommend her if you can deal with sort of plotless books, and I will be going back and reading more of her back catalogue. And then the last one is a short story collection, and that's Manchester Happened by Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi. You may have heard of her because she wrote Kintu, which is a novel that came out I think 2 years ago, which I haven't read but definitely want to read, having read this and enjoyed it. So short story collections I find really hard to rate and review because obviously there's lots of different stories. Some of these I absolutely loved, some of them I've already forgotten, but overall I enjoyed her tone and I enjoyed her sort of characters and themes, so I'd recommend this, and I'll definitely pick up any book that she has in the future, which I think is, you know, always a really positive sign. So there's those 3, and then I've got 2 graphic novels I read. The first one being the beautiful Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me, and this was written by Mariko Tamaki and illustrated by Rosemary Valero-O'Connell. So I've read lots of books by the Tamakis, so Mariko usually works with, I believe, her cousin Gillian Tamaki, and I really love all of their books. So as soon as I saw that one of them had a new book out, I was interested, you know, regardless of who else was involved. But actually I really enjoyed the artwork, which is quite similar to the Tamaki style. It's this sort of, it's all done in grey, white and pink the whole way through, which I really loved, and there's just lots of white space. It doesn't feel crowded, which is something I really enjoy, and it just feels like there's a lot of space for the text and the characters to move. It doesn't feel cramped, which I really struggle with in graphic novels. So this is quite a simple storyline, I guess. So this is set in California and we follow a girl in high school who has recently started dating a girl called Laura Dean. Laura Dean is super popular and all the girls fancy her, and she keeps breaking up with our main character and then going off and going out with other girls and doing all these other things, and then just sort of picking her up and dropping her as it suits her. And our main character has an amazing group of friends who are all super interesting and just such greatly crafted individuals, such characters, and throughout the graphic novel she lets them down because she's forever chasing Laura Dean, and it's really about her realisation that, you know, Laura Dean isn't really worth chasing and she needs to reevaluate what the people in her life really mean to her and how she shows them that. So it's quite a simple story, and in a way I guess not as groundbreaking or as like emotional as I hoped it would be. I guess I found with the Tamaki's other books, for example, this one, Summer and Skim, I felt really emotional reading them, and this isn't that. This is much lighter in tone, much fluffier. But saying that, I really loved all the happy moments in this. It's a really sort of bohemian culture we're showed here. So the main character works in a like local organic cafe, and everyone who works there is gay, and all of the food that you can order is named after famous lesbians, which I think is amazing. So they'll just shout out the name of a burger that's named after like a famous lesbian actress from like, the 1960s or something, which I loved. All the characters were brilliant. I really liked the drawing style, and there was a sort of fandom nerd culture in this as well, which I enjoyed. So I'd recommend this, and you know, usually my choice of graphic novels is much more emotional and serious than this, but I still really enjoyed it, and I think it's worth giving a go, and certainly one I will keep and, you know, probably read again because it was very enjoyable. This next one was pretty much a disappointment to me, which I feel awful saying because it was quite expensive, and that's On a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden. Now this is really freaking heavy. It's over 500 pages, and what I knew before picking it up was that it was a sci-fi gay romance sort of set in space. So we follow, there's two timelines, one which is, obviously it's all in some future world, I guess, or alternate world, we're never really told. But we have one timeline where we're following these two girls as they meet at an all-girls boarding school, and they start a relationship with one another, and you just sort of follow them along as this develops and where it goes. And then we have a storyline which is I think around 5 years later, in which we're only following one of the girls, and she is joining this space crew who go round space and sort of fix old buildings. They're sort of space architects, I guess, or engineers, and as that's happening she's sort of looking back on her past, and you know, a new adventure sort of begins. So confused. We have this whole world set up and it's the bare bones of a world. There's no so there's all the characters are female, except from we have one main character who's non-binary, which I really enjoyed and I think was handled really well throughout the graphic novel. However, we're never told how we've come to a world where there are no men. It's never mentioned. We're never told you know, if this is, like I said, is this an alternate world or is this our future? Like, why has this happened? There's some conflict, some history we're told, which was relayed in the way this sort of thing is usually relayed in graphic novels, where one character is like, I don't know the history, can you tell me? And then we just get this monologue where we're, as the reader, very obviously told, like, you don't know this, so for the sake of you, we'll pretend this character doesn't know this. And even then it wasn't very well developed. I, you know, thought I was going to love the art style, and I will say I still love the colour palette. Like, the colour palette is beautiful, tonally just perfection. But I found it crowded. It's quite dark, and the text would be really concentrated in speech bubbles, sometimes to the point where I'd, you know, really have to, you know, my eyesight's fine, but I'd have to like screw up my eyes to read it. Sometimes some of the characters looked a little bit alike, and also there's this great romance which to me was like, so there was no depth to it. I didn't really understand, without spoiling anything, some of the characters agreed to do something which is pretty dangerous, and I think their reasoning for doing it was, I don't even know what their reasoning was. It was absurd to me. So yeah, I was really disappointed in this. And I guess the only great thing I can say about it is that, you know, the art style, I think if given more space, like if she didn't crowd so much in, it is beautiful. But I don't know, having read this, if I definitely wouldn't buy another Tillie Walden book. If my library had one, I'd give it a go. Based on this, I just think, you know, she had 500 pages to develop this pretty simplistic story, and actually we're lacking character development, we're lacking world development, and we're lacking plot development. So I don't really understand what all the space was taken up with. So yeah, bit of a shame. So on a more positive note, I reread 2 books this month, and I reread both of them on audio, and it was such a joy. And I feel like I've finally like broken the back of like rereads, because I always say I want to reread books and I don't make time for them. And at the moment I'm finding it easy to make time to reread them on audio, because it's a different like medium to try them, and it feels sort of fresh, and also it doesn't take up physical reading time, so I don't feel that guilt of I could be reading a new book now. But I think I'm enjoying these so much that I think I will carry on reading actual physical books as well as audiobooks, because it's just been such a joy. And sometimes, like, you know, you're forever on the hunt for the next 5-star read, the next amazing thing, and I feel like this with everything, like with film and TV and music. And actually sometimes it's okay to just accept that you have already experienced some of the greats, and it's a shame to not experience them again. So I'm, you know, buying that wholeheartedly. So one of them that I re-listened to was The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. Absolutely phenomenal. I love the audiobook narrator. She is amazing. I'm going to write her name here because I can't remember her surname. She's one of my favourite audiobook narrators, and the way she does all these voices is phenomenal. Like some of the like older male characters as well, like the real Essex boys, was just beautiful. So I think particularly if you're not from the UK and you've read and enjoyed the Essex Serpent, I think to really get a feel for the way these people would have spoke, because you know, when I read this book, I recognise all these accents and the way that the sentences are structured, because I know people in this region who still speak this way. But if you're not from the UK, then I think, you know, you might not completely get that, and that's the same for me reading books that are not from a region that I'm from. So yeah, I'd really recommend the audiobook. And I went into this and the next book with a fear that I wouldn't love them as much as I had, with a fear that I was gonna lose the love of a favourite book, with the fear that I'd been wrong, or that, you know, I was suddenly gonna spot like a glaring flaw, like some sort of really poor development or something like that, and I really didn't. I think this is just as beautiful as I ever thought, and I've heard people who, you know, don't enjoy it as much say there's too much going on. I don't know, I really thought it was handled to perfection, and oddly I have tried to read her first book, which I think is called After Me Comes the Flood, and I DNF'd it because I thought it was really poorly developed, and I've since read Melmoth, which I didn't think was great. I thought it was, again, quite poorly developed, really atmospheric and beautifully written, but the characters and the plot were just pretty poor. So this is like a gem amidst her otherwise, I guess, to me, a bit confused writing. And this is proof to me that she can carry characters and plot development with such grace, and I really hope to see her do it again, because I don't think her other books have shown that. But yeah, this just blows me away every time. Absolutely love it. Love the nature writing, love the characters, just, yeah, brilliant, excellent. And the next one is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. So I hadn't read this book for I think 7 or 8 years, and I was terrified I wasn't going to love it as much as I first had. I thought I would, because I've since read lots of Daphne du Maurier books and really enjoyed all of them as well. But yeah, just slightly concerned. Bloody loved it. And again, the audiobook is phenomenal. So this is an Audible original, I think, and the audiobook narrator is called Anna Massey. And when I first started listening to it, I was a little bit unsure because she's very well spoken, and I didn't know if I'd like managed to warm to the narrator. Having said that, I never did warm to the narrator. Like, I've said this before, when I read Rebecca the first time, I just wanted to grab the protagonist and shake her and say, you know, you silly girl, what are you doing? Like, why are you just letting all this happen, and letting all these people like run roughshod all over you? And so actually, you know, I don't need to like the audiobook narrator. But having said that, I sort of realised about an hour in that that is how the narrator would have sounded. She's highly educated, and the time and place she lived in, that's how well spoken she would have been. And actually, I think it was a really great choice, and it really worked. And this is just phenomenal. Like, I can confidently say, having reread it and having read lots of Gothic fiction, I love historical fiction. I've read a lot of Gothic fiction set in slightly eerie, big old houses. This is head and shoulders above the rest. I can't think of another book, you know, that's a Gothic fiction set in a big old house that comes close to this, and the ones that do are also written by Daphne du Maurier. This is what she does, and it's absolutely brilliant. And if this isn't your thing, then you won't like it. But if you do like any of those things, historical fiction, you know, Gothic fiction, old big house stories, then this is amazing. It's so brilliant. And I think one thing I'd forgotten, like, I remembered all the stuff with Miss Danvers, but I had forgotten something right at the end, which I won't mention, and I'd also forgotten the involvement of all the other people who worked on the estate. I'd forgotten how close we get to, you know, the manservants and the butlers and their stories and the way they all view what's happening, and I really enjoyed all of that. And there's a scene by a window that I was listening to on my walk home, and I was just gripped. I had chills. Really hot day, and I had chills because I couldn't believe how well it was done. And you know, that's when this audiobook narrator is in her element, because the voices she does for the other characters are amazing. And if you're, you know, not already scared of some of them, you will be when you hear how she does their voices. So bloody loved it. Again, I still don't like the narrator. I still think she's a bloody idiot, but still think it's a phenomenal book. So there's that one. So the last one I want to talk about is another short story collection, and that is Salt Slow by Julia Armfield. This is the advanced reader's copy, but it is out now in a beautiful hardback edition. So I've had quite a few people talk about this one, and it's always interesting to hear what short stories other people have enjoyed compared to like the ones that I really loved. So if you haven't heard, this is a short story collection that is focused on the female body. It's focused on feminism and sexuality and a woman's power, really. And all of these stories border on horror or the fantastical, and they're sort of filled with myth. And this isn't quite what I expected, because I thought this was going to be more focused in the natural world. In my mind, I went in thinking this was going to be very like Fen by Daisy Johnson. All those stories are set in and around a really rural village, and that's what I expected, and it isn't the case. A lot of these stories are set in cities, in towns, in apartment buildings, which was absolutely fine once I realised that's what it was about. So I think one issue I had overall with the collection was that it felt without definite place. So there's one story in which you're told actual locations, and they're cities in England and Scotland, but a lot of the stories I was unsure whether these were set in the UK or the US or anywhere else in the world. They just didn't have a real sense of location, and I don't know if that was the author's intention, but I guess as a reader I don't like that. If I'm reading a book that's set in England, then I want to know that. I want the author to have written it so well that without being told I'm sure of that, and I didn't feel that way. I felt like a lot of these stories could have been set anywhere, so that was one thing I didn't love. What I did really enjoy is the sort of edge of darkness a lot of these stories bordered on. So I've heard people mention their favourite stories. My ones were Mantis, which is the first story, which is about a young girl whose body is gradually changing and her sort of coming to realise what that means and the power that gives her. I really enjoyed that one. Stop Your Woman's Ears with Wax, which I've heard loads of people rave about. It's about an all-girl rock band and the fan culture and some sort of effect they might be having on their fans, which was really interesting. And I also really enjoyed Salt Slow, which is the last story, and it is about a couple who are in a boat on the ocean after sea levels have risen, and there's sort of things in the deep, and I thought that was absolutely, you know, brilliantly written, and I felt really like goosebumpy reading it. But there's a lot of stories, I look at the list of them and I just think that one was alright, or actually that one I just read to get through. So one I really found a bit tiresome was Cassandra After, which was about a woman who's in her apartment, her girlfriend has died recently, and then her girlfriend comes back to the apartment and like she's like a decaying body and they're having this conversation, and I just think it's been done a lot of times, and yeah, nothing different happened, so I found that a little bit like whatever. Smack, I don't think was worth being there. I think it should have been cut out. It's just about this woman deciding to not remove herself from a house because her and her partner are breaking up and she wants to keep the house, but it was just left me feeling a bit cold. And you know, there's some I look at here and I have to sort of remind myself of what that story was about. So some of them I loved, some of them I was a bit like, So I feel like I'll follow what she brings out, but I would read the blurb and decide whether I was going to pick it up, because I feel like there's some types of stories she does which are right in my wheelhouse, absolutely love, and there's some stories she does which just aren't for me and are a bit more distant, and that isn't the sort of about characters that feel sort of distant, and that's something I really struggle with. I really have to feel a connection to a story and to the characters. So, but I think she can write beautifully, so I recommend this, and I see why lots of people are talking about it. So there's that one. So yeah, those are all the books I finished in the month of June. Let me know if you've read any of them and what your thoughts are. I'd also love to know your thoughts on rereads. Do you do them? Do you know, sometimes just go for a run of them? Because part of me has just felt tempted to bin everything else off and just stick with rereads for like the next 6 weeks, but I don't think I've got it in me to be quite that rebellious. But it is very tempting because you know you're in safe hands, and in all likelihood you're going to just have 6 weeks of reading like pure like amazingness, because you can trust yourself more than you can trust anyone else. So yeah, let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.